Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Retire Well, the show that's designed to help you retire well in all aspects of your life. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio is Kevin Bucher. He is the co-founder and a financial advisor at Citizen Advisory Group. And if you have ever asked yourself the question of when can I retire? How do I know if I have enough saved up in order to retire? Am I ready to go that route and enter this next chapter of my life? You are not going to want to miss today's show. Kevin, my friend, I'm excited to talk about retirement readiness with you.
Yeah, who's not ready to retire?
Right?
So this ought to be a fun one.
Yes, it will be. Well, and do you find that this is a question a lot of folks come to you when they're meeting with you for the first time? Are they asking this all-important question of when can I actually retire?
Yeah, and I think for a lot of folks, they do have a date in mind, but I've also found that it's very much a moving target for folks. Things change rapidly where you think you have a date in mind, which is perfectly fine. I think that's a very natural thing. It's obviously a really important and big decision. So yeah, if you're wondering when you will be ready for retirement, today is the show for you.
Awesome. Well, let's start off with what are some things that folks need to be considering when they're analyzing and thinking through this important decision?
Yeah, I think it makes sense, Kristen, to start by just kind of talking about some of the key ages. We can kind of walk through some of these key ages, with the first one being 55, because I think a lot of people are very unaware of the significance of turning 55 when it comes to your retirement.
So let's talk about it.
Yeah, so 55. So for those of you that are working and you're participating in an employer-sponsored plan, if you leave employment from that employer-sponsored plan, I think the general conception for most people is that I can't access that money in my 401k or 403b account until I'm the age of 59 and a half. Well, that's actually not true for the work-sponsored account from that actual employment.
So whether you have a 401k, 403b, you're talking about workplace retirement plan.
Workplace retirement
right?
plan. Yep. So if I have an old plan from a previous employer, 55 actually doesn't mean anything for that plan. But the current plan that I'm on, if I leave employment from my employer and I'm 55 or beyond, I can actually access that and not be subject to the IRS early withdrawal penalty. I'm still subject to taxes, right? It's not as easy to escape the tax man, but I wouldn't be subject to that penalty for withdrawals from that company-specific plan.
And that's important to know, these in-service withdrawals. I think a lot of folks aren't aware of them.
Yeah, so for someone that's looking to retire early, it really opens up some access to cash that you might not have thought you had. So what you wouldn't want to do, so here's the cautionary tale, what you wouldn't want to do is retire at 56, roll that workplace plan over to an IRA as a 56-year-old, because now you're subject to the IRA rules, which say I can't take a withdrawal until I'm 59 and a half.
Or I'm hit with that 10% withdrawal penalty. So yeah, you got to be so careful.
Yeah, so taxes plus the 10% early withdrawal penalty doesn't make sense.
No,
right?
for sure.
So 55 is a key age.
Yep, okay.
The next key age would be 59 and a half. So we kind of maybe gave a little hint to that one.
Right.
So at 59 and a half is when you are first eligible to take withdrawals from an IRA account and not be subject to the IRS penalty.
Right.
For those of you that are still working, here's maybe an unknown for a lot of you. A lot of times that age also coincides with what's called an in-service rollover option. So even though you're still working, you can actually roll that account over to an IRA that is maybe more to your liking as opposed to just the employer-sponsored option. That is plan specific. So it's not a given that your employer-sponsored 401k or 403b account has that rule in it, but it is fairly common in today's marketplace. And what the intent is, for those that are getting into closer to retirement, it gives them greater control over their finances as they're getting closer to retirement.
Which I think is so important for folks, because a lot of times those employer-sponsored plans have a limited amount of options. And so to your point, this just kind of opens up, the world becomes your oyster and you get to have more control over your money. Yeah,
and I would add, everything you said is spot on, but I would add to that employer-sponsored plan is not a plan that's tailored to you, the listener of today's show. So once you get to 59 and a half, it allows you to now take greater control over your investment and in your financial future.
Absolutely. Well, gosh, there's so many important birthdays, if you will, back to back. So next up on the list is 62, and that brings up another very important subject, doesn't it?
Yeah, so Social Security, and we'll probably get into that a little more depth here later on, but 62 is when you're first eligible to collect your Social Security benefit little known fact, for most of us, it's actually 62 in 1 month, but it's just easier to say 62, right? So 62, you're first eligible for Social Security. Next up, we have Medicare, 65. So now I'm eligible for Medicare benefits at 65.
Right.
66, 67, that's kind of going back to the Social Security. That is going to be what your full Social Security age is. That's when you're entitled to your full benefit. It's somewhere between 66 and 67.
Right, depends on the year you were born,
year
right?
you were born, yes. So then we move up to 70. Again, that pertains to Social Security. That's when your Social Security benefit stops accruing. So there's no point in delaying your benefit beyond age 70.
Right.
And then
That's
finally,
the maximum amount you can get at that point.
yes. So no point waiting beyond 70.
Right.
And then finally, we have age 73. The significance of age 73 is when the required minimum distributions from 401k, IRA accounts have to start.
Yep.
A lot of key ages there.
Lots of important birthdays. So important to know and be prepared on the front end for these things.
Yeah, because they all pertain and play into when will you be able to retire.
Right.
Right. So
sure.
if you were retiring as a 57-year-old and most of your money was in an old company's 401k plan and that money's not accessible to you, that makes retirement much more challenging because you can't access your money. You're not Social Security age. Where are you going to get the money you have to live off of from?
For sure.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I love that you talk about, it's not just when can you retire, but what are you going to retire to? This is a really unique conversation that I think a lot of folks in this industry aren't having. And if you're already working with a financial advisor, they may not be talking to you about this. So let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, it's actually an important part of the process of, you know, work is such an important part for Americans out there, right?
Yes. It's a huge part of our identity, right?
Huge part of our identity. And it gives us a sense of purpose. It connects us socially. So there's so much to that. And I think why I asked the question, what are you going to retire to, is that you do have to have something to retire to. And because I've seen it, unfortunately, the flip side of that if you don't retire to something, and the alternative, I think, is what I call retiring to the recliner. I just see that doesn't work out very well most of the time. You don't live a fulfilled life. Your health tends to fail quickly because you're not getting the activity and you're not as involved in things. So we have to have something to retire to, and that could be something totally different than what your work life was. But the good news is you get to write that script.
Yes. You get to design it, right?
Yeah. So having something to retire to, ultra important.
Yeah.
And you know, retiring is a process, and everybody's going to do it a little bit differently. But you get one chance to retire the way you want, and the more you have it planned out, the better that retirement is probably going to be for you.
One other thing I know that you're passionate about helping folks understand is what the shift that happens, this transition, if you will, into retirement. And so you have to look at what you lose by no longer working and what you gain. So talk with our viewers a little bit about how you help folks decide if they're ready to retire based on those components.
Yeah, I think part of this is, I think people, it's not a surprise or it's obvious. There's what I would call the obvious things about going into retirement and the not so obvious. So on the obvious side, I ask this question at our live workshops all the time. So when you leave the workforce, there's going to probably be some things that you're going to miss. And everybody knows what I'm talking about, right? What are you going to miss when you stop working? And it's the
paycheck, right? Yeah. That steady stream of income, knowing exactly where it's coming from.
And I think that's a pretty universal answer, and that's one of the obvious. I don't know that people think through as much one of the other things that I think is obvious, and for a lot of us, that's healthcare. We're gonna lose the employer-sponsored health insurance. It's rare in today's marketplace that the employer is offering retiree health insurance benefits, right? So we're gonna lose the health insurance benefits. So we have to have a solution for those two things. We have to be able to replace the paycheck, and we have to have solutions for your health care.
Right.
And I say this, I've said this on other shows, that it's an unfortunate reality that as we get older, we don't tend to get healthier.
Right.
So being in the right insurance plan takes on more and more importance. So we're going to kind of dig into those two in more depth in the next segments.
For sure.
The paycheck replacement and the health insurance replacement. But what I think of as the not so obvious things, they're so not obvious that I had to look back at my sheet to remember what they are. And one is the purpose. So we kind of talked about that already. We get such a sense of purpose from our employer. Where are we going to get that from in retirement?
Right.
And so we need to think through that. The other big one is it's such a big part of our social lives.
Yes.
And having social connection is very important. Part of our mission, as we've talked about on other shows, is to build better lives through the financial stability and security, as well as health and wellness and social connection. And we get so much of that through the employer that we have to have a solution for that in retirement as well, because it is an important part of having a healthy retirement.
For sure. It's part of that overall comprehensive financial plan, and I love that that's what sets you and the team at Citizen Advisory Group apart, is looking at all of these components, because they definitely play a part. I know we have a lot more to cover in today's show, but one of the things you're offering today is a Social Security comparison report, which no doubt is an important piece of figuring out when you can retire. It depends on, a lot of times, what that Social Security amount might be, right, to help you fill in the gap of your income. So share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's one of the bigger decisions that you'll make in regards to your retirement, when to take your Social Security. Too often when the decision comes down to, I'm retiring in June, I'm going to file for my Social Security benefits in June. Well, that might not actually be the optimal strategy for you or your family over the course of your retirement. So this Social Security comparison report that we're offering allows us to look at different Social Security starting points side by side. And by doing that, we can kind of see where is that important break-even point between the two strategies. And just as importantly is, what is that difference over the course of our projected lifetime in total benefits?
Wonderful. Well, I know that that's something that is so important to figure out, and I love that you help folks navigate that part of retirement planning. And so listen, if you're sitting at home and you're going, gosh, I need to know how I can optimize and maximize my Social Security, that's an important part of you figuring out how ready you are for retirement, we encourage you, pick up the phone, call that number on the bottom of your screen, 866-630-1675, to get your complimentary Social Security comparison report. You're also welcome to scan that QR code. So simply take out your smartphone, you can scan that QR code in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and a member of the team will reach out to you and connect with you to set up your complimentary visit to get your complimentary Social Security comparison report that way as well. When we come back, we're going to be diving into how do you replace that income that you'll lose once you retire. You're not going to want to miss what Kevin has to say right after this.
I have a bachelor's degree in education. I spent the first part of my working years teaching. I left the teaching world and went into a family business endeavor that eventually led me down to the financial services world. And there really is a lot of overlap between the two, taking comprehensive topics and breaking that into common sense, easy to understand framework, whether that was in the classroom or now in a meeting room with clients. There was a transition, but some of the skills from the education world transferred very well over into the financial world. By and large, people are very confused about the financial planning process, and oftentimes they kind of settle for the default outcome of that, of not really having control. One of my favorite parts of the process is putting the solutions together and then presenting that back to the client and seeing maybe some light bulbs going off to understanding things that maybe there wasn't a great understanding of before. Setting goals, working towards those goals, and helping them along this journey to having a more successful financial outcome. I do have an oversight role as well, where I'm overseeing other advisors. We work very well together in a collaboration where we bring different areas of knowledge and expertise to the table to really provide more comprehensive solutions for our clients.
Welcome back to Retire Well with Kevin Bucher. He is the co-founder and financial advisor at Citizen Advisory Group. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley. We are talking today about retirement readiness. How do you know when you're going to be able to retire? And Kevin, I love that you shared that story in the first segment of when you do your live events and you ask people, what are you going to miss the most about, once you retire? It's that paycheck. It's that steady stream of income. And so that shift happens where we now have to pay ourselves in retirement. So let's talk about this paycheck replacement and how you really can develop a written income plan for folks.
So for the record, I ask a lot of questions in the seminar, but that's one that they never get wrong. They always get that one right.
Everyone's a unanimous answer with that, right?
Yes. All right, so how do you replace the paycheck? And you have to look at what are your resources. And it's different person by person, but there's some similarities usually across the board, right? So usually we're going to have some type of Social Security benefit, either your own benefit or a spousal benefit from your spouse. For those of us that worked in a position where there was an employer-sponsored pension plan, which is rarer and rarer these days, there might be a pension, and then it's your retirement savings. What have you saved to help fill in those gaps?
Right.
So we kind of look at it as we need to recreate this paycheck, and we think of the paycheck in two categories. The first category being, well, we've got to make sure we cover some of the necessities.
Right.
Right. So the necessities of life, of food and shelter, transportation,
Medicine, all those healthcare costs, right?
the necessities. And there's some unknown to that because we don't really know what the future needs are going to be, but to a large degree, we need to know what the needs are, and we need to have some solutions in place that are going to meet those needs for the rest of your life.
Yes.
So it has to be sustainable for the rest of your life.
And ongoing.
And ongoing.
Right.
So that kind of opens the door for, okay, well, what type of solutions should we use for the necessities of life? And I would suggest that we need to use some of your resources that are very reliable, predictable, and sustainable. And in some ways, have some guarantees behind them.
Yeah.
So the first part is, how do we make sure your needs are met?
Right.
The second part then is looking at your wants. And there maybe can be some variability in your wants. And maybe that doesn't have to be as secured as the needs are, which will open up the door for maybe some bigger returns in the investments or investment gains, because that can be a little more tied to like a stock market account. So, I don't think it's probably a great idea to have the needs, the necessities covered from a stock account, for example.
Which is volatile and which you don't know what's going to happen, right?
Yes. So it's not very reliable. You certainly wouldn't have a whole lot of peace of mind and comfort, especially when we're in a down market and you're laying your head down to sleep at night, knowing that you might have just lost 20% of your assets, and how's that going to affect your income? So again, we're going to replace the paycheck by starting with understanding what the necessities are for your budget, and then matching up certain resources to cover that. And that's going to start with Social Security.
Right.
So Social Security is what's a very overlooked piece of the retirement puzzle.
It's such a key piece of the puzzle,
key
right?
piece. Very little time is usually given to the decision, and the proper evaluation is a lot of times not done. And here's how I'm kind of talk about Social Security, and I think by using these words, it maybe helps people understand the significance of it. First of all, it's a lifetime income stream.
Right.
Lifetime is really important because we just talked about your necessities. You're going to have you have to meet these necessities for a life. Having food and shelter and transportation. And, you don't need that for the first year. You need that for the rest of your life. So it's a lifetime income stream. It's a cost of living adjusted income stream. So there's some inflation protection in there. So for example, in 2023, we saw an 8.7% cost of living adjustment. There was a raise of 8.7%. Huge. So it's got some inflation protection in it.
Built in, right?
Number three, it's a tax efficient income stream. So at least 15% of your Social Security is going to be federally tax free. And if we plan it right, hopefully we can bring that down to a much smaller percentage being taxed. That's federally.
Right.
State tax in Ohio and Michigan, you don't pay state income taxes on it.
Which is huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
And fourth and finally, it's going to provide some survivor protection for a surviving spouse.
Right, because when one spouse passes away, you do lose one of those Social Security checks, but you get to keep the higher of the two.
Yes, so planning that ahead of time is really important. So when you think of Social Security in those terms, it's a lifetime, inflation-adjusted, tax-efficient income stream with survivor protection. I think that really highlights how important that decision is and making sure you get that one right.
Well, and to your point, you're talking about helping folks optimize, and there's so many different calculations. It's over 567 mathematical calculations of when someone can take Social Security, and what's right for you might not necessarily be what's right for the person sitting next to you. There's so much that comes into play because the personal factors far outweigh that math.
Yeah, and I would add there's so much coffee shop advisor recommendations being made about Social Security without really the proper analysis.
Or you talk to your neighbor, you go to the water cooler, hey, when are you claiming? All right. I mean, a lot of folks, they just go off of what someone else is doing.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is we have Social Security software that runs all of those thousands of trials of the different filing strategies.
Right.
And it tells us really what is the optimal Social Security strategy based on your expected life expectancies. And I don't know one actually knows that, but we can use family history, we can use your current health to kind of be a guide to that. So we have the software that runs the analysis, and then the output that I like to use is what we're talking about as far as the callers from today's show get this complimentary Social Security comparison report, which is just taking two of those strategies and showing them side by side. It'll show us and highlight for us where's the break-even point of these two strategies. So by waiting, for example, you need to live long enough to catch up for the benefits you missed. That's what the break-even is. So it's going to show us exactly where that is.
That crossover point, if you will, right?
But it's also going to show us what is the difference over the course of your lifetime. And sometimes the difference between one starting point and another is kind of staggering to folks, how big of a difference that Social Security decision makes. We're not talking, because I think people focus on what is the difference per month? Well, that's just for the month. Now multiply that by 12 months and then multiply that potentially a 25-year retirement horizon. And the difference is not a few $100s typically, it's tens of thousands of dollars and sometimes greater than $100,000 or more between the different strategies. And you know, I have some examples that I would love to give. I think from a time purpose, we're not going to get that, but I've seen examples where the difference between filing strategies based on the household life expectancies, where the difference was close to $500,000. It's a $500,000 decision you're making, and that is significant to the financial security of replacing that paycheck.
Absolutely. Well, Kevin, such an important thing to know. I love that you are providing this for folks today. And if you're not aware, if you call the Social Security Administration, they give you information, but they are not allowed to give you individualized, personalized advice based on your individual situation. The only way you can get that is by working with someone like Kevin and the team at Citizen Advisory Group. So we encourage you, pick up the phone, call this number, 866-630-1675, and for no cost, no charge, no obligation, you're going to be able to come in and get your very own Social Security report, completely complimentary from the team of Citizen Advisory Group. So call that number, or you can scan that QR code. And when we come back, we're going to be diving into another huge issue that a lot of folks are concerned about when it comes to figuring out if they're ready for retirement. What about healthcare costs? How do you plan for those? What if you want to retire before you hit Medicare age? Stay with us. We'll tackle that when we come back.
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. After nearly a lifetime on the job, you should be rewarded for all the time you spent working. Whether that's crossing off items on your bucket list, learning a new passion, or rekindling the love of an old one. After all, life isn't over when you stop working. It's the start of an all-new chapter. The one where you're the writer and you get to choose how your story will go. A way to achieve that is by having a clear financial plan to sustain your golden years. The biggest fear most retirees have is if they'll have enough money to maintain the lifestyle they've always enjoyed. Having a plan to help protect you against the curveballs life often throws will help to maintain your lifestyle. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
Welcome back to Retire Well with Kevin Bucher from Citizen Advisory Group. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley. We are talking today about retirement readiness. How do you know if, when you can retire? Are you ready to do so? So much great information you're providing today, Kevin. And I know that we talked a lot in the last segment about Social Security. We started off the conversation talking about replacing our income once we retire. I know there's more components that you want to touch on with that.
Yes, so quickly, Social Security usually is not going to replace the full paycheck that you're trying to replace. And that might not meet what your income needs are or wants for retirement. So we have to use your other resources. That could be potentially a pension, or it's your investment portfolio. And when we're looking at that, you know, there are certain options out there that come with some contractual guarantees to a lifetime income stream. So if Social Security alone is not meeting what your income needs are, and you want to guarantee or secure some more, just know that there's some options out there that you can secure a lifetime of income that's got a contractual guarantee to it.
It's like a personal pension you get to create for yourself, right?
Yeah, so building your own personal pension. There's also some investment portfolio withdrawal strategies. They're all viable strategies. Tailoring it to what your individual preferences are really important. so that you have the plan that you want for your retirement.
For sure.
So we spent a lot of time on the Social Security piece of that.
Yes.
There's a lot more to
For
it.
sure. Yeah.
But I do want to spend the rest of today's show kind of getting into the other thing you're going to probably lose, which is the health insurance
For
component.
sure, because I hear so many more folks are working longer than they maybe wanted to because they're concerned specifically about health care. You know, I have a friend that wanted to retire before 65, but was going, I don't qualify for Medicare yet. How am I going to fill this gap? So let's talk about this important piece.
Yeah, so I think key, the way you set that up is when you're retiring, you're going to either retire pre-Medicare eligibility, which again is age 65, or you already will be Medicare eligible. And I get that question or that comment all the time about, well, I can't retire yet because of the health insurance.
Right.
And I understand that, but a lot of times that's coming without being fully informed of what your options are. So if you're retiring pre-Medicare, just know that there's insurance solutions out there for you. That could be going on to the employee or your spouse's employer covered plan. It could be the COBRA option, and I know that that's expensive in most cases, but there are options out there through COBRA that allows you to stay on your health insurance plan. It's also where the Affordable Care Act comes into play, where you can get individual health insurance pre-Medicare. And the key of that is it's subsidy based. So premiums are expensive as a 62, 63, 64-year-old, but the premiums that you pay are subsidized through tax credits, all based on what your income is.
Right.
So on other shows, we've talked a lot about the importance of having a retirement income plan. And really, for folks that are retiring pre-Medicare, it's ultra important to have that retirement income plan and setting it up in a way that you're getting the income you need as a retiree, but maybe it doesn't look like as much income on paper or on your tax return. And that allows you to not only be tax efficient in that window, but qualify for these tax subsidies that reduce the health insurance premiums.
Wow.
So there's ways to navigate that so that you don't have to feel chained to working just because of the health insurance benefits. It's not easy. That gets really complex, but it is some pretty impactful work that we get to do to actually be able to show those people that are, hey, I can't retire because I'm not ready for Medicare yet, that, hey, there's another way to do this.
Exactly. And I'm sure you provide a lot of relief for people that thought that they had to keep working, and then you're able to show them, actually, you can go ahead and retire. What a gift.
Yes, yes. Hey, retirement's a great time, and we want to help people get there in the most efficient way possible.
Absolutely, and to do it well. Well, Kevin, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, that for the last time, that number to call, 866-630-1675 for your complimentary Social Security comparison report. We hope you found this show to be informational, educational. That's how it's intended each and every week. We appreciate you watching, and we look forward to being back with you next time.